I'm going to be in a meeting in about 10 minutes. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
All right. Hello, everyone. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this New Jersey Association of Library Assistants session that is being presented in partner with the New Jersey State Library Talking Book and Braille Center. We have two fantastic speakers who are going to be talking all about what the TBBC does. My name is Heather Christian. I am the treasurer for NJALA. I am also the youth services librarian at Pennsauken Free Public Library, which is an independent library in Camden County. So we have two presenters, as I said, today. We have Elizabeth Burns, who is the head of reader services at the New Jersey State Library Talking Book and Braille Center. She has presented at such places as ALA, PLA, YALSA, and various state library programs. And her articles have appeared in the Hornbook and the School Library Journal. Our other presenter is Jennifer Apgar. She works in the Youth Services Department in the TBBC. She is a mom to a sweet and sassy toddler, and she recently graduated, yay Jen, from San Jose State University with her MLIS. So I will let the two of you take it away. Oh, also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please hold them until the end. You're welcome to utilize the chat, and we will take questions all the way at the end. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Heather. We appreciate it. And we appreciate being invited here with you all today. So thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. As Heather mentioned, my name is Jen Apgar, and I am the Youth Services Librarian at the Talking Book and Braille Center. On our screen is our contact information. So my phone number is 800-792-8322, extension 823, and my email is japgar@njstatelib.org. And I am joined today with my colleague, Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Burns. I'm head of reader services at TBBC, and my email is eburns@njstatelib.org, and my extension is 804.
And you'll also see our reader services number and general email, which is tbbc@njstatelib.org, and their general extension is 861. We'll touch on that a bit more, so that probably make more sense as we go along. And we will have time at the end for some questions. So if you do have any questions, we do ask that you hold them until then, or if you want to pop them in the chat for later on, that's fine too. Especially because as we go on, we may answer your questions throughout the presentation, but if we do not answer them, please do ask us at the end. So we are going to have some questions along the way for you all as well. And our first question that we have is, how familiar are you with the Talking Book and Braille Center? And if you want to use the chat to answer, we'll keep an eye on that as we go along. So if you have heard about us, if you don't know about us at all, just drop that in the chat, and it's just helpful information for us. So as I mentioned, we are the Talking Book and Braille Center, and this is the landing page of our website. And here is a few images of some of our patrons, each of them with a different device to read their books. And all of these we'll be talking about later on in the presentation. So before we get really started on this, I'm going to pass it over to Liz to talk a bit of history about our library.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, our library, it can be a little bit complicated because of all the different factors involved that while we, okay, Jen, we're seeing, okay, that while we are like a public library. There's so many different things involved that it's not really like a public library. So to begin with, TVBC is a division of the state library, and we're the division that provides library services to New Jersey's print and blind and print disabled population. And that involves providing audiobooks, Braille, and large print books. And one of the reasons we're so happy to be invited to talk to you all is because we know that you work with customers and customers who could be interested in our services. We're one of those places that not everyone really knows exactly what we do, or they think that they know what we do, and it turns out not quite that they not quite get the full range of what we offer. And for example, you might have a patron who talks about needing audiobooks, not just wanting them for commute, but because they can't read the regular print anymore. Or you have a patron complaining about how the print in a book is getting too small, or do you have a magnifier to borrow so that they can read the newspaper? All of those people can qualify for our library, and so we can help them with their reading needs, whether it's books or magazines or newspapers, as we're going to explain. But back to TVBC, our patrons are blind and what we call print disabled, which Jen is going to explain a little bit further on, and they range in age from 3 to 103. It's a whole range of ages, though most of our patrons are older, and because they've suffered vision loss from age-related things such as macular degeneration. Some folks are using tablets and smartphones to read our materials. Others are not comfortable with tech at all. So it's also a whole range of the needs that patrons have. The state library, because as I said, we're part of the state library, has entered into an agreement with the Library of Congress. And this arrangement means that TVBC functions as the regional library in New Jersey for the Library of Congress's National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled, or NLS. And the next screen is the NLS website. And NLS is a nationwide program that's implemented on a state level. So, I mean, it's a little weird that way. So here in New Jersey, they provide us the Braille and the audiobooks and the magazines and the players to read the audio and the Braille. And each state is run a bit differently. Like we said, here in New Jersey, we're part of the state library. In other states, it might be part of a public library. That's what goes on in New York and Philadelphia. In other states, it might be the Department of Education, which is I think what they do in Iowa. But the main thing to remember is that NLS provides these services for anyone who either lives in the United States or is a United States citizen. And in New Jersey, it's our library. And if you're hearing this and you're thinking of someone in another state who would be interested in these services, they have someone in their state for doing basically what TVBC does for their state. The next slide. We provided a timeline because I'm one of those people who I like timelines, maps, and family trees. I can't use a family tree or map for this presentation, so you got a timeline. Basically, NLS was founded in 1931. So yes, they are celebrating their 90th anniversary. That means that if you go to their website, there is a ton of information about NLS, their history, and their founding. In a nutshell, before 1931, there was no real centralized library for blind adults to borrow materials. Some cities might have had them and were making Braille for the people who lived in their cities, but there was nothing to address the reading needs of blind adults across the country. So in 1931, that changed when NLS was established in terms of the library to create the materials and the funding to take care of that. And one of the driving factors for it is that a lot of those blind adults were vets from World War I who had come back blinded from the war. So that was one of the reasons there was this national interest in reading by blind adults. As time went by, things got added, things got changed. As I said, it began for blind adults in 1952 is when people were like, hey, you know who else is blind and need things to read? Children. And along the way, they also realized that there's other reasons why people need audiobooks other than being blind. So physical disabilities was added, and Jen's going to talk about that a little bit more. Two of the most recent developments, 2020 and 2021, are electronic signatures and expanding the list for certifying authorities. So if you've heard our presentation in the past, both of these two things are really new and kind of change how people can qualify for our services and how to sign up for our services. Next slide. One of the things we like to emphasize is that NLS, more so than many public libraries, is really a creature of the laws and regulations that went into creating it in 1931, and then all the laws and regulations each time something got changed. And if you are interested in all these laws, regulations, amendments, and all of that, you can go to the NLS website and read them all to your heart's content. The main thing to know for the purposes of this is there's a lot of laws. And every time you start hearing, oh, why do they do things this way or that way, or how is this possible? It's because there's a law. Jennifer, okay. So some of these laws include amendments to the copyright law, which is what allows us to deliver unique services to people who are blind and print disabled. And another thing to remember is if there's an abuse of the program, we're going to talk a lot about how this is for people who qualify. So someone who doesn't qualify but just likes audiobooks were to sign up for the program, or our audiobooks all have a type of like a digital rights management type thing to restrict who listens to them. If somebody were to try to break that so that anyone can listen to them, it would put the whole program at risk and jeopardize it by breaking these federal rules and regulations. And on the next slide, as a nutshell, all combined, this is what these laws and regulations do. They enable NLS to create the audio and Braille book versions of books that have been published in the United States. It's limited in audience to those who are blind and print disabled. Because of the way it's written, there's no limit to the copies that can be made, which means pretty much that there are no wait lists for our books. It's not like we only get one copy of something. We have as many copies as we need for the audience. The restrictions are on who can borrow them, people who are blind and print disabled, and how they can listen to them. And we'll explain that a little bit more. And one of these that is really important is called the Chaffee Amendment. And on the next slide, the Chaffee Amendment is one of the more relatively recent ones. I know 96 isn't that recent, but before then, NLS was doing, as I said, making the audio, making the Braille, but before 1996, yes, they could make it, but they had to get permission from the copyright holders, the authors and publishers, which, I mean, especially 1996, they were calling people up, explaining the program, trying to get permission. After 96, they were given the ability to do this without getting the permission from the copyright holder, as long as certain conditions were met. This means that things got, you know, if they wanted to make a book, they could just make the book. They didn't have to get the permission. This is another one of those really significant things that is why we are so sensitive to only people signing up who qualify for it. What this also means is, to be really clear, the exception to the copyright rule means that publishers and authors aren't getting paid for our books. When you buy a book in a bookstore or your library buys a book for your collection, the publisher and the author are making money. I mean, the author might only be making 25 cents a copy sometimes, but they're making money on it. For our books, they're not making a dime. The publishers and authors support this. Like every time I've talked to an author, they're always thrilled to find out that their book's been made in Braille or their book is here, because they realize the need to have equal access to people who can't read print. But this is why if there was an abuse of the program, we would lose these rights and it would really negatively impact on the folks who need the audio and Braille. Next slide. And I think now we're with Jen, right?
Thank you. So as Liz had mentioned, our services are for individuals who cannot read a standard print book, or who cannot hold a print book. So this could be someone who is blind. It could be someone with a visual impairment where even the print in the newspaper is too small to read comfortably. It could also be someone with a physical limitation that prohibits a person from holding the book or turning the pages of a book, even if that's for an extended period of time. So that could be somebody who has arthritis, where it may be hard to turn the pages of a book or someone with a temporary or who temporarily cannot hold the book due to an injury or a concussion, or someone with a brain injury. And those with reading disabilities also qualify for our services as well. We do also serve places who serve eligible individuals, such as nursing homes, centers that host adult daycares, and libraries. We do have an application that has to be completed for folks to get signed up for services from us. The most current version of our application can be found on our website. The most important part of that application requires a signature from a certifying authority. And it's without that signature, we can't do anything with the application. So that person is signing the application to certify that the patron qualifies for services with us. We don't need any medical records. We don't need background information to go with the application, but signature is all the proof that we need. So because of this, we like to emphasize the importance of making sure that the person who's signing the application, that their name, contact information, their place of work, job title, and all those credentials that have been earned are included on the certifying authority page. You can see here, this is an example of that portion of the application. This is page 2 of the application. It's the certifying authority page. And this is where they would put their name and their credentials. So here we used Riley Smith, MLIS, or whatever degree was earned on the authority name line or on the title and occupation line. Also on the title and occupation line, we ask you that the person includes their title and also the name of the library or the institution at which they work. So it could be ABC Library, Youth Services Librarian. Also do include the address, the phone number, email, and then the electronic signature, which is nothing more than just typing on the line in the PDF. That the font that came up on that happened all on its own. So speaking of electronic signatures, that is something that's relatively new for us. We can now accept applications with an electronic signature. And previously, we did require an actual signature on our application. So that meant you could fill out most of the application online, but you'd still have to print the application, physically sign it, and then scan it and email it to us, or just put it in the mail and mail it back to us. So now that we can accept electronic signatures, it simply requires that the certifying authority type his or her name on that authority signature line on the application, along with all that other information that's necessary to be completed that I mentioned before. And then once all of that is done, the application is complete. The person can email the application to us and we can process the application. The nice thing about it is that it gets it to us quicker, and it's the most direct way to get it to us. So the patron can be signed up faster with services from us. You're not waiting through the mail for the application to be sent to us and then processing it. If, however, you choose not to submit the application electronically, then there is still an actual signature that does need to be on that application on this authority signature line. And we do ask that it's a clear and legible signature. Also, if the certifying authority is submitting an application for more than one person, each person needs his or her own application filled out with the signature and detailed information on each one. So just because it's been signed once for one person, it does not mean that that information carries over for all of the other applications. Each person needs a separate and complete application. Recently, the people who can sign and certify an application has changed. All of this information can be found on our application, so there's no need to remember all of it right now. It has always included doctors of medicine, doctors of osteopathy, ophthalmologists, optometrists, registered nurses, and so on. It's here that you see the new updated changes to the certifying authority list. It now expands to include educators, certified reading specialists, school psychologists, and librarians. These are all people who can sign for any disability, but the biggest impact will be for those who qualify with a reading disability, because those individuals work more closely with those with reading disabilities. And the reason this is so noteworthy is because it now means that those who qualify with a reading disability no longer require just an MD or a DO signature. Prior to this change, only a medical doctor or doctor of osteopathy could sign the application for those with reading disabilities. It often proved to be a huge barrier for those with reading disabilities because in most cases, the MD or the DO, they didn't make the diagnosis. There have even been times that because of this, the doctors wouldn't sign the application because they knew that they didn't make that diagnosis and they didn't feel comfortable doing so. Now, those with reading disabilities, they qualify for services from us just like everyone else. So it means it's much easier for those with reading disabilities to get services from us because educators and certified reading specialists, school psychologists, and librarians can now certify that application for reading disabilities. It just makes it a level playing field for everybody, and it removes a huge barrier of needing that specific signature. And it also eliminates a cost that might have been associated with needing that MD or DO signature because of co-pays or office visits. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Liz.
Thank you. And now we have the very important question of what is your favorite pizza topping? And I have for some reason, unpopular option of my favorite one is anchovies. As a matter of fact, when I go like out to eat with like my sister or my mom, they refuse to get it on the pizza. They'll put it in a little cup on the side so I can add it individually to my slices, because it seems no one else loves anchovies. I just don't get it. But anyway, if you could share what your favorite pizza topping is, I hope at least one person agrees that I have the right favorite pizza topping, but we'll see. And then on the next slide, to our services. So Jen's explained how to sign up. And so the question is, well, then what are you getting when you sign up? What does that mean? And so we have Braille books and audio books, which these pictures show. Both can be in a physical format, like an actual Braille book that gets sent in the mail, or for our audio books, it's basically the audio is preloaded onto a flash drive. It's not using a CD or something like that. And for both our Braille and audio, it's also available in an electronic format that can be downloaded. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. For the audio, we lend a machine that can be used to listen to our books, which is in the picture here. And we'll be talking about that more later. But one of the nice things about that is like we are like a public library, and that there is no cost for anything that we talk about. And that includes the machine to listen to the book. So if there's a patron who's like, I want to listen to audiobooks, but you know, I don't have a CD player, or I don't have an MP3 player, or whatever, it doesn't matter for our library. We give them the means to listen to the audiobooks. And then for our patrons who like their smartphone or tablet, we have an app that also can be used for both our audio and Braille. Next slide. We also have large print. Now, NLS does not provide large print. The rules and regulations that govern them is for producing audio and for producing Braille. And so for large print, we know that many public libraries have large print, have great adult large print collections. So we don't carry that. What we do though, what we focused on was large print for children and teens, because we saw that that really wasn't being carried to the same extent as that for the adults. We like to say that our collection is the largest in the state, the largest large print collection, and it covers some grades about grade 3 on up. And for the large print, once someone's a member, we can mail those books to them either to home or also to school. So if someone's at school and has a reading assignment and they want the large print mailed directly to school, we can do that. Next slide. And here's just a copy of, we were really happy when we got in all of the Wimpy Kids series in large print. So that's the picture from there. If you want to find out what we have an online catalog. We also have some book lists and stuff on our website, but probably maybe the easiest way to find out whether we carry the large print book that you're looking for a patron is to give us a call or email us, and then we'll look and we'll see. And also, if for some reason we don't have it, but we find that it's available to purchase, we'll find it to add to the collection so that we can then loan it to the patron, because chances are if that patron wants it, other people want it too. So we'll do everything we can to get that large print book for the patron who wants it. In all honesty, our main problem right now in getting large print is sometimes finding it. People don't understand that children do need and want large print. Sometimes it's low vision. Sometimes it's because it's easier to read with certain reading disabilities. But they understand that seniors like it. They don't understand that fourth graders like it too. And there can be a really limited selection of what there is to purchase out there. And that's really our only limitations on it right now. And on the next slide, moving to Braille books, we have Braille books for all ages. For these pictures on the left, we're showing some what we call our print Braille books. And that is a book that has both print and Braille on it. And that's sometimes also called a dual vision book. And the reason for those books is for it could be for a parent who's reading Braille who wants to be able to read a book to their sighted child, or is a teacher and wants to read books to their classroom. And so we have the print Braille books for them. And then the other picture here is showing what some of our Braille volumes look like. Now in this instance, it's a selection of some children's books, And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, that looks a lot different from a regular print book. And yes, from the way that Braille is made, it takes up a lot of space. Let's put it this way. You can keep on changing the font size in a book. The size for a Braille cell always remains constant. So the longer a book, the more volumes it's going to take. And those volumes often resemble what basically looks like a type of 3-ring binder. They take up a lot of room. And we're going to have some photos of just how much room some of these books can take up later on. Next slide. And just here is audiobooks. As I mentioned earlier, our audiobooks are on flash drives. Those flash drives are in cartridges that are easy to handle, and they only work with our machine, that flash drive, the Talking Book Player. Those flash drives can hold several books at once. Right now, we can send up to 8 books on any one cartridge out to a patron who wants it. And each comes in a mailing container, and that mailing container is used to return books to us. And each container has a mailing label on it that marks the postage as free matter for the blind and handicapped, so that mailing it to and from the patron is no cost. And just as I say, there's no cost to join our library, we talk often about mailing things back and forth. All the mail to our patrons and then from our patrons back again, whether it's audio, Braille, large print, or the machines to listen to things, use free matter. So there's not even a cost there to the patron for joining. The mailing card that we use is on the right, and one side has the mailing address to the patron to get it to the patron. The other has the list of books on the cartridge. And I just want to say, Jen, I didn't realize roasted garlic on a pizza. I'm going to have to try that next time. I've had that in pasta, but not my pizza. All right, and so yep, that card contains the list of all the books on the audio cartridge that has been sent out to the person. And the next slide is, this is what our audiobook collection looks like. Unlike CDs or playaways or most audiobooks you think about, our cartridges are not preloaded with a specific book. What happens instead is we have a bunch of blank cartridges. And when I say bunch, I mean thousands. And when someone wants a book, we take that blank cartridge and we create a cartridge unique for that patron with the books they want on that cartridge. When it gets returned, part of the process of returning it is erasing everything on that cartridge, and then we can use it for a new patron for what books they want. All of the audio is digital and stored on a computer hard drive. And so that's, as I said, somebody wants a book, we pull up the record on the catalog. Our catalog interacts with this machine to create that cartridge. It creates the cartridge. It also automatically creates that mailing card we showed you with the person's address on it and the list of books on the cartridge. We call this machine the Gutenberg, and I have to say we love it. It's so much easier for everyone involved, for all staff. Let's just put it this way. You never have to reshelve a book. You never have to go to the shelves and says, the computer says it exists, but I can't find it because somebody put it in the wrong place. All you have, it's always there on the computer. And this is also why, because it's on the computer, we can have, it's like we have 50 people wanting one book. We can create those 50 cartridges for them to get it out them. There's no waiting for someone to return it. And the reason that we can do it and we can have our files and audiobooks this way is because of all those rules and regulations that we're talking about earlier in the program. And now back to Jen.
Thank you. And Liz, I think you missed somebody is Team Anchovies.
Oh, yay!
So thanks, Liz. So yes, as we've talked about, there is the audio, we have our audio cartridges, and to play our audio cartridges, if somebody needs it, we do also provide the audiobook player needed to listen to them, the books that Liz was mentioning. The player that you see in this image here, it is loaned on an indefinite loan, meaning that the person can hold on to it for as long as they're a patron of our library. What does get circulated back and forth are those cartridges that Liz was talking about that are played on the device. We do ask that if somebody has one of these players, that they hold on to the box that it came in, so that if or when they need to return the machine for whatever reason, they have that box, including if it needs to be repaired. On this slide is an image of both of the players that we have available. There is a basic and an advanced option. The basic is on the left, the advanced player is on the right. Each one has the basic functions of play, stop, fast forward, rewind, volume up and down. They each have a sleep timer that allows patrons to get to set a timer in 15-minute increments, and it will turn off and save we're in the spot of that book when the timer goes off. There is also a tone control and a speed control. These two features are nice because each narrator has a different style of narration, and therefore a listener may want to adjust that narrator's tone or speed. A person may be more comfortable listening at a higher or a lower pitch in a person's voice, just as they may be more comfortable listening at a faster or slower pace. Those two options are there to allow for those adjustments, but what's nice is that the quality of the narration is not jeopardized, meaning the narrator is not turned into Alvin and the Chipmunks or whatever the opposite of that is. These two features are also really nice for somebody with a hearing loss. We do recommend trying and playing around with these settings for anybody who may have a hearing loss, where they may be more comfortable listening at a higher tone or a lower tone or higher pitch or lower pitch in a person's voice. So that's an option too to play around with. And same with the speed, the two combined may be a more comfortable listening experience. So the advanced player that's on the right, it does have 5 additional buttons that allow for a little bit more navigation. And it does include jumping through chapters a little bit easier and inserting marks in a book that allow a person the ability to save sections of the book to refer back to. Think of it like putting a Post-it note in a book. So if someone is reading a cookbook and wants to save a recipe, or a student is doing a report and wants to save something to refer back to later on, that mark feature is there. And then you'd be able to use the other one of I believe it's the menu button, to be able to find those marks in the book and jump through them easier with what's saved. We are also participating in a pilot program to loan Braille e-readers to our patrons. This is a small electronic device that allows patrons to download Braille to the device or receive Braille on cartridges by mail to read on the device. And you can see an image of that is on the left, and you'll also see it compared to a Braille book on the right. It is a small electronic device that allows patrons to download Braille to the device or receive Braille by cartridge. The device is significantly smaller than a hard copy Braille book. It makes it much more convenient to carry around and saves quite a bit of space. You can see the size comparison on the image on the right in this slide. In that image, it shows the comparison of the hard copy Braille book versus an e-Braille book. This title, which is Killing Floor by Lincoln Child, is a 6-volume Braille book. So all of those black spines and the open volume is the full book for Killing Floor by Lee Child. It's a hard copy Braille book. It's obvious that the size alone is significantly different, and it takes up a lot of space. It may also take some time to arrive by mail because it may depend on how many boxes are needed to send that book out to a patron. With the e-Braille reader, the patrons can either download the Braille book and have it instantly, or we can send it to them on that cartridge in the image, which are created by the same machine that Liz was talking about just a little bit ago. It's significantly smaller than the hard copy book, which makes it much more portable. We are one of several pilot libraries testing out these devices for our patrons. So if you do happen to know anyone who is a Braille reader that may be interested in participating in this project, just let us know. We'd be happy to help. And for now, I'm going to turn it back over to Liz.
We mentioned downloading books and how all our books are digital. Once someone's a patron of our library, they have access to a website called Braille and Audio Reading Download. Once they're a member of our library, this is a password protected site so that they get a unique password and sign into this site. And then they have access to all the audio and Braille and can download and have that access 24/7. They can also download a really large number of books. Right now, I don't want to say it's unlimited, because what we found is that it can sometimes vary, like what you can download if you're using one device versus another, but the number is like huge. It's like a lot, like even more than anybody could read in a month is how many books you can download at one time. But it gives you 24/7 access to the collection. And a lot of our patrons like that because if you're waiting in the mail, there's nothing worse than you want a book and you're waiting for it to get mailed to you, as opposed to being able to, you want that book and you get it right now. Downloading from the BARD website does take a few steps because you have to download the book onto a flash drive, you have to unzip it, and then put it into our machine. And so software called BARD Express was developed, and it's just a simpler way to access BARD to make it even easier to download. Now, for both BARD and BARD Express, we're talking it in just one slide. These are things that we'll actually can do an hour program or a 2-hour program for libraries to explain how this works, go step to step through the process of finding the books, using the website, the difference between the audio and the Braille and what's available. But we just wanted to make you all aware of what's there. And then Bard Mobile is what they call the app that allows people to access Bard from their smartphone or tablet, and also Kindle Fire, and then play the book on that phone or tablet. And if Bard sounds familiar to you, one of our statewide projects is working with public libraries to assist our patrons with Bard and downloading books. Because I mentioned earlier that many of our patrons are over 70, and many of our patrons, some of our patrons are amazingly tech savvy, and they have all the latest devices and stuff. Other of our patrons, not so much, or they just don't have the computer or the internet access. And so they're the ones who they might want a book right away, but they have to wait for it in the mail. So one of the things that we've done is partner with some public libraries, offer a lot of training on how Bard works, and then our patrons can go and visit that local public library, and the public library will download the books for them so that they can have that same instant access to Bard. And we call that our Bard Pilot Library program. And I forget how many libraries we have about now, 20, 30. But if that's something that you'd be interested in or want to know more about, just let us know. And then on the next slide, we just wanted to share some more about TVC services. As we've explained already, there are no wait lists for books. And just to also reiterate, there is no cost to patrons. One of the reasons we mentioned that a few times is sometimes people confuse us with Learning Ally or Bookshare, and both of those are nonprofit groups that provide audio or electronic Braille to folks who are blind and print disabled. And Learning Ally is located in Princeton, and sometimes people confuse us with them, and both of those do have fees to join, but we do not. We also have magazines. So those patrons who love magazines, we have audio and Braille. And we also have Reader's Advisory. Reader's Advisory is really important and critical to our library. Jen's going to talk about it a bit more, because when you don't have a browsing collection, you have to find alternate ways to help people browse to get the books they want. So that's why Reader's Advisory matters really, really matters a lot to our patrons and our library. And on the next slide, we have right now over 100,000 titles. And those are children's, fiction, nonfiction, foreign language books. Some of those books are not available commercially. In other words, they're not books that you could buy for your own library, even if you wanted them. And I'll show that in a couple of other slides. We also have world language titles. You might remember from the beginning, those 20 minutes ago, when we were talking about, I was talking about the different rules and laws that govern us, NLS, and I talked about how it can be for audio or Braille published in the US. So you might have been wondering, well, what about those books published outside the US? And there was a recent treaty just in the past couple of years called the Marrakesh Treaty that allows libraries in different countries to lend their audiobooks made in their own country for the benefit of folks who are blind or print disabled. So in other words, if there was a Spanish audiobook recorded in Spain of a book published in Spain, we now have access to that to loan to our patrons. What's going on with world language titles? It's really exciting. It's changing almost every day. So if you have a population who needs audio, blind or print disabled, and are interested in those world language titles, let us know, because that would almost be in our program right there, explaining how it all works. And then we also have what I like to think of as backlist titles. In other words, part of the reason we have the 100,000 books is once a good book gets made and it's digitally stored, it is there forever. So we always have it. There's no publisher saying, okay, we stopped selling it so you can't buy it anymore. We have it all the time. And on the next slide, I just want to illustrate what I mean about titles not available commercially. Here are just 4 titles of books that are not available to be bought by a public library or a bookstore to be sold to most people, on the commercial book market. So let's say you had a patron come up to your desk and say, the The print and even the large print is too small for me. I love this author, Mary Pat Kelly. Do you have of Irish Blood in audio for me? I'm dying to read it. And if you looked up on your catalog and say, oh, we don't have it here, what's your next step going to be? Your next step could be then pulling up WorldCat. So on the next slide, you pull up WorldCat, and what does it show you? There's no audio there. So at this point, your typical response might be telling the patron it doesn't exist in audio, we can't help you. But you've sat through our program, so you remember NLS and how they make their own audio in Braille. So you're like, wait a minute, let me just check the NLS catalog and see what's going on there. And sure enough, when you go to the NLS catalog, you see Of Irish Blood was reported for our patrons. And so this person qualifies for our services, and they've just shared with you, hey, the print's too small. You see that when they're trying to hold the book, they've got it, up like that, or they've got to use magnifier, so they qualify for our services. You've just turned that no into a yes for that person. And another example I'm going to show for the next book, Somewhere in France. Person really wants Somewhere in France in audio, so you look up on Amazon. I'll be honest, half the time I forget WorldCat and I look on Amazon instead, to see if there's audio. And you look here, and it's time we did this screen cap, it says the audio copy is available for over $1,000. What that pretty much tells you is it was made at some point, it's out of print, they're only selling used copies, so it might as well not be available, even though at one point it was sold commercially. But remember, at NLS, once we record it, we keep it. So if you look up this on the NLS website, for their catalog, you see Somewhere in France is also something that is available to download. So once again, you can turn a no into a yes for a patron. And then I think we've got one more poll. What are you currently reading? And here we're using for our image our new New Jersey State Librarian, Jen Nelson's summer reads list of what she's been reading this summer. And this summer I am reading, I just finished a nonfiction book about Jane Austen, because I'm in my, once every few years, you just get obsessed with Jane Austen. That's this year for me. So I just finished that book. Also murder mysteries. Don't ask me why, but I love them. And the mystery I just finished reading was called The Temple House Vanishing, about a mysterious disappearance at a boarding school. So of course it doesn't end well. And with that, we're going back to Jen.
Thank you, Liz. So I will add to what I am reading. Now that I'm out of grad school, I don't have to read textbooks, so I'm very excited about that. And I have, as Heather mentioned in the beginning, a 2-year-old at home, so lots of Pete the Cat and any other picture book that she is into right now. But for my own reading, I'm currently listening to The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and very much enjoying that. So if you want to drop what you're reading in the chat, feel free to do so. If nothing else, it could give others some inspiration of things that they may want to read next. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our library and browsing, which is not really a proper term for us because we're not really a browsing library. Our shelves of audiobooks are actually a computer with all of the books that are stored on it to be able to create the cartridges that Liz was talking about before. That's the image on the left. That is our shelves, if you will, of audiobooks on the left. And then our Braille books, which is the image on the right, they are housed in a warehouse and they're ordered by a session number. They're not ordered by subject or anything that's browsable. They are just simply ordered in the way in which we receive them. So what you're looking at in the image on the right is just rows and rows of Braille books. It's the spines that we are looking at. And that's how we know the appropriate number to go up and find the book and pull it, but there's nothing browsable about them because they are in no particular order other than how we received them. Our large print collection is the only thing that's organized by last name. So it really is our only browsable collection when we're able to have patrons in the library to browse. So there are several ways that you can get books from us. One way is calling our reader services department to order books or ask about the books that we may have. We do ask that if people are leaving a message that they leave a clear message with their name and in particular their phone number, so we know how to get back in touch with somebody, because you'd be surprised how many times people say, hi, it's me, call me back. We don't know who you are and we don't know your phone number. So, that information is helpful. Please leave it for us so we can call you back. And if there's any information about your call that's important, please leave that as well. Patrons can also email us to request books or to add books to a request list of books that they would like sent at some point. And we can also send books automatically based on somebody's reading interests. So if patrons don't want to contact us for books and they just want books sent automatically, we can set up a reading profile for that person and have our computer system choose books based off of their reading interests. Our system does maintain the list of books that patrons have read so that they are not sent the same books over and over again if they choose to have books sent automatically. We are able to add subjects of interest, preferred authors, and if patrons do not want books that contain, if they don't want books sent automatically that contain violence, strong language, or descriptions of sex, we can set that on their profile as well. And I'm going to touch on all of that in just a moment. So there are several ways to find books in our collection. Patrons can call and speak with his reader's advisor. Our reader's advisors are not librarians, and this position does not require an MLS degree. So if it's something that sounds enticing, keep an eye out for any job postings from us if ever something were to open up. We do have patrons that, our patrons can also browse Talking Book Topics. It's a bi-monthly publication that contains the most recently added books within the last 2 months. It's either sent to patrons by mail or they can access it online or download it to listen to. If patrons find books that they are interested in reading in Talking Book Topics, they can call us or email us to request those books. They can also fill out the order form that's attached to the back of Talking Book Topics and send it back to us. There is also the NLS online catalog that Liz has mentioned before, and it does contain all of our Braille and audio books throughout the entire collection. These are titles that we would also have in our library. The only thing though that the catalog does not tell you, it does not tell you if the Braille book is checked in. It also does not list our large print books because that's a collection that we maintain separate from NLS. But any of the audiobooks listed, they are available. However, and they should be available unless it's listed as in process. And that just means that we're getting the book. It's just very new and it hasn't been added to the collection yet. So it's a great tool to be able to look to see, is this something that exists? How do we get it for somebody? Last, once a patron is set up with our services, we can also set them up with access to our OPAC. It is a password protected site, so someone does need to be a patron in order to access this catalog. And with this catalog, patrons can browse books and add books to their request list, but it's important for them to know that these books are not necessarily sent out automatically. They are basically added to a wish list of books that they would eventually like to read. They're just not sent automatically. So if it is something that somebody wants more immediate, we do suggest that they call or email us to let us know, and then we can get it out in the mail for them. The catalog also does not show if the Braille book or the large print book is checked in, just that the title does exist in our collection. So because, as we've mentioned, you can't really walk into our library and browse our shelves like you can of your public library, there is some additional information that NLS does include in their annotation that may be different than the annotation you're used to seeing or that you have in your catalog. On this screen is an image of a few different annotations from Talking Book Topics. The first entry, Trouble the Saints, notes at the end that it's unrated and is a commercial audiobook. As Liz has mentioned, NLS has agreements with several major publishers to use their audio narration to add to our collection. So this is helpful because it means books are added to our collection much faster, but it also means though that no one at NLS has listened to this book to know if there are instances of violence or if there's strong language or descriptions of sex. And because the reader can't just pick up the book and walk into the library and pick it up off the shelf, to be able to look at the cover and see that it looks a little bit violent or that the annotation alludes to having some strong language or sex within the book, NLS adds these notations to the book so as not to catch a reader off guard. You can see that notated in the second book listed, Paladine's Grace. When it is an unrated book, however, this has not been done for the sake of getting the book added to the collection as quickly as possible. If readers have asked to not have books sent that contain violence, strong language, or descriptions of sex, these unrated books will not be sent automatically, just in case that appears in the book. Patrons can, of course, request these books at any time specifically, and we can absolutely send them out. They just don't get sent out automatically. There are also times, as you can see in Paladine's Grace, where it says there's some strong language or violence or descriptions of sex. And so it's not necessarily all, but maybe some. So some readers may prefer some is okay, but I don't want a lot. And we can set that as a setting on the account as well. In the third annotation, the one and only Bob, you can see that there's a reading level listed to indicate the intended audience for that book. Whenever you see an annotation that does not have a reading level, it's intended to be an adult book. Otherwise, the reading level will indicate the reading level range for that book. So for instance, you might see for grades 2 to 4 or preschool to 2nd grade and so on. All of this information is included in the annotation of the book. So if you're browsing the NLS online catalog, our OPAC or Talking Book Topics, you will be able to see that annotation if there are the occurrences in the book. So we do also want to just mention briefly, we do have a few additional services that we have. We do provide programming and outreach, just like we're doing today, as well as a book club that meets virtually once a month. And there's more information about that on our website if you want to learn anything more about it. We do also offer a few specific services just for youth services. We do have that large print collection for our kids and teens that Liz has mentioned already. As we know, it's hard to find large print for kids and teens. We do our best to maintain that collection of large print for our patrons to borrow. And because it isn't massively produced for this reading level, we try our best to purchase whatever we can to add to our collection. I saw Heather mentioned earlier about it being expensive, and yes, it can be expensive. So we do try our best to maintain that collection as best as we're able to. But because we have so much of it, we do like to brag it's the largest collection of books, of different books in the state. So and we know that it's hard for those kids to get it. But now, because of the changes that I had mentioned earlier about who can certify an application, it's much easier to be able to loan out that collection of books to our kids and teens, because it is easier to sign them up for our services with the certifying application, and with that being much easier. That is technically our only browsable collection, as I've mentioned. We do also have a summer reading program that we do for our youth patrons. In the past, we've done that by mail, but because of the pandemic, we've converted it to be by email over this last year and this current year. We do still follow the same theme, summer reading theme, as everybody else. We also work with CBVI to offer a LEAP program, which is Library Equal Access Program, and CBVI is the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So LEAP it provides training to our TBBC patrons on accessibility features on iPads. And in addition, all of our patrons have access to NFB Newsline, which is an audio news service to provide access to over 500 news publications, both nationwide, local news, weather alerts, job listings, and more. We do also have a YouTube playlist that can be found through the State Library's YouTube channel. It contains some brief tutorials of searching BARD, information about our library, and so on. And last, you can find us on social media. We are already following, be sure to follow us on Facebook. We're part of the State Library's Facebook and Twitter. And you can search for specific posts for TBBC. So here is the Facebook page, and Twitter, it's at NJ State Library. And we also have one last, possibly the most New Jersey question there is out here. And in my only one answer, though Liz will disagree with me. Is it pork roll or Taylor ham? Please put your answers in the box. And I'm going to pass it back over to Liz now to finish this out.
And yeah, I've always just used both. So that's why, like, what can I tell you? Sometimes I say one, sometimes I say the other. We just wanted to mention before we end that there's a lot of times that we work with other groups or agencies where we have, shared customers. I mentioned the BARD pilot library program where we work with public libraries in terms of assisting folks with downloading books. And Jen mentioned two other collaborative projects we have, LEAP with the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and LEAP with CBVI also works with local libraries, because the training that they provide on accessibility features and things like iPads, that training takes place at public libraries. So it's public libraries working with us and us working with CBVI and getting that LEAP training out there. And for LEAP, we had to suspend it during the pandemic, but I'm really happy to say that it is starting up again this fall. We have 4 locations where it's starting. So if that's something that your patrons would be interested in, or you want to know what libraries are involved or how to get a library involved, just email us. NFB Newsline also, if someone's eligible for our program, they're eligible for that. So if you have that patron who loves newspapers but thinks that, because they can't read them anymore, they can't read the newspapers, we have that on audio. And I just want to mention NFB Newsline, unlike our audiobooks, you can get that on Amazon Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play me NFB Newsline, and get all the news that you want, from your favorite newspapers. Another project we have with CBVI is the Technology Loan Program, where we work with CBVI in loaning computer hardware and software, including CCTVs, to adult clients of CBVI. And here you have a CCTV pictured. Basically, it's a huge magnifier, except it's much more sophisticated than that. And here you can see it's helping somebody with a book by blowing up the text on the book. It can work with a checkbook, photographs, anything like that. And what it does is it basically can help somebody with employment training, or just quality of life. They tend to be really expensive. and different ones have different features in terms of what they do with font and contrast and stuff like that. So one of the reasons for the loan program is so people can try it out before investing a few $1,000s in a CCTV. And with that, I think we are done. So if there's time, we're ready for questions.
And it looks like our responses are mixed about the pork roll or Taylor ham, but
Right.
seems pork roll may be winning.
Okay.
Canadian bacon vote in there too.
Yeah, I was amazed. I didn't realize, obviously didn't realize growing up that that was such a New Jersey thing until you went to a different state and you were like, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't have this? How else do you, but also I found out that they don't have hard rolls like we have hard rolls, because what better breakfast is hard roll and butter? And that's apparently something else that just didn't exist outside of like New Jersey and New York. So. All right, got a couple of messages. Let's see. Didn't know what pork roll was until you moved here 10 years ago. But the question is, did you become a convert to pork roll, or were you like, you all are just have no taste?
And more proof that pork roll is a New Jersey thing.
I did not.
I do think it's an acquired taste.
Yes.
You're born into, I'm not quite sure.
I think you have to acquire the taste it too, or you don't get, yeah. Yep, Kathy says, you went to the training years ago and it's nice to see how the program has evolved. We are really happy. When we used to do this program and we had to make that point about only a doctor could sign for reading disabilities, and people were always so disappointed, and we would explain to them it would take a literal act of Congress to change it. And that's basically what happened. It took an act of Congress, but now it's changed. And so we're really pleased. But thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks everybody. And our contact information is there if you have any other questions later on. I like Taylor ham, but not pork roll. Fair enough. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Now, do you go by Elizabeth or did you go by Liz?
Liz is fine. Liz is good.
Okay. Thank you very much, Liz and Jen, for doing this. I see a bunch of people are saying they're signing off, and we are at just about 3 o'clock. So I think this is a good place to wrap up. As I said, this was recorded. It's going to take a little while to convert, and then we will share out once it's posted. Thank you very much, both of you, for doing this. I know I attended a version of this presentation from a few years ago, and one other person put in the chat that it's nice to see how it's evolved and it's continued, to exist, and all the different options that are there now. So I think this was fantastic, and thank you so much for donating your time to do this with us, and maybe we'll have you back again soon.
Looking forward to it. Going to NJLA has always been such a great experience. So we look forward to being able to do that in person once again.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Heather, for having
All
us.
right.
All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.